I'm going to be ranking every ant in Empires of the Undergrowth. Keep in mind that these are all my opinions and are not indicative of true value. So if you disagree with me, go right ahead. First up is tier 1, the black ant. I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, I'm not saying that black ants are bad, but they're not good. They have nothing special about them. 50 food is great, and they do a decent amount of damage and have good health. But when you compare them to all the other ants in the game, they just are very lackluster. There's just no reason I'd really recommend using black ants over literally anything else. If you're playing as Black Ant Colony, well, you have no other option, but choose a different colony, please. Next up is the Slave Maker, and I'm going to put it in B tier. I'm putting it in B tier because the wiki didn't have the right image. Every other ant has their soldier image, but not the Slave Makers apparently. But being real for a second, the reason I'm putting them in B tier is just because they do not compete with the top ants. They are good. They are very food efficient. The problem is other ants are way more food efficient and or effective in battle. They're much better than black ants, and they're actually really good in battle. It's just, well, like I said, when comparing them to the other ants in this game, it's just, they're a bit lackluster compared to the others, but they're definitely a step above black ants. All right, moving on to tier 2, we have the wood ant melees, and I'm sorry, but I'm putting them in D tier. The job they do very well, like excellently well, and that is tanking for the spitters. The issue I have with the melees is that you need another ant to make them good. If you're using melees on their own, you should just be using black ants for the same cost. So since you need another ant to make them good, I'm putting them in D tier. Next up, we have the rapid fires, and I'm putting them in S tier. The reason I'm putting rapid fires in S tier is because unlike the melees, they are good on their own. They don't need the melees. I mean, they're a lot better with them, but they don't need them. At level 3, they can slow down enemies, so essentially they can melt any creature before they get into attack range. They do a boatload of damage, and they can essentially survive on their own without anything else to tank it. What more do you need? They're a lot better compared to their competitor, the mortars, which are going to go in A tier. Now, mortar ants are very good. Any spitter is good. The issue I have with mortars is they cannot hit their shots. They are so slow to fire that sometimes they will be stuck looping in the attack warm-up animation and not actually shooting against faster creatures like spiders. Because they stutter around in the attack warm-up animation, they are a lot less effective than rapid fires, which is why I'm putting them in A tier. Still very good, especially against giant groups of ants and corridors, but rapid fires are just a little better. Moving on to tier 3, we have the Leafcutter Media. And I'm going to put it in B tier with the Slave Maker. Again, like the Slave Maker, they're very good. They're not as cost effective. They're very effective in combat, but their price is just a little too high for my liking, and they're not as effective as I would want. Still a very solid ant, especially in the damage department and health, but there's just better options. Moving on to the majors, we're putting both Taunt and Stun in A tier. Now I'm going to put Taunt just a little bit higher in my personal opinion, but I think they both belong in A tier, mainly because of the cost. They are very effective in combat. They do a lot of damage, have a lot of health, and tank, which is a lot better than this tank. Again, it's just the price. 150 food to get one ant is pretty expensive. Why would I get one major when I can get 3, almost 4 fire ants? This means faster collection of food and also faster collection of murdered enemies. Taunt majors can heal, which is why they're going slightly above stuns, because stuns cannot heal. That being said, if you use one of them, you're going to be fine. They're still pretty solid no matter which one you choose. Up next, we have Trap Jaws, and they're also going into B tier. Very good, very effective. Price, again, holding them back. The fact that they can fling themselves back and heal really does increase their effectiveness. If they did not have the fling back and heal, they would probably be C tier because they do hit like a truck. They don't have the most health, but because they can fling themselves back, they're taking the injured ones out of the fight, so the full health ones are getting prioritized. And again, they're healing. Any healing in this game is amazing. The only thing holding them back is the price. Up next, we have Army Ant Medias. I'm actually going to put both the Medias and the Majors in A tier. The reasoning is a bit different. The Medias are very cost effective. At 40, they're just as cheap as Fire Ants and do a lot of damage. And then when you combine them with the Majors, they just snowball that flash buff, making them super dangerous. Now, Majors on their own are very effective and dangerous. The reason they're not in S tier is just because of the price. They're one of the most expensive ants in this game. And so because of that, I can't quite justify S tier. S tier for me is good combat effectiveness versus food effectiveness. And while Army Ant Majors have some of the most combat effective stats, they just are not food effective. Next up, we have the Little Black Ant, and they are going in S tier. They are dirt cheap, and they can confuse enemies, increase the amount of damage taken to them. Like, they're so dirt cheap, it doesn't matter how many of them you lose. You can keep on the offensive and still recover more food than you're burning. Like, that is amazing. Plus, the stun is so good, it makes them much more effective against larger creatures that normally would wreck them. Honestly, Little Black Ant is probably the most underrated ant in the entire game. Up next, we have the Big-Headed Ant Major, and my god, this hot pile of trash. You know what? Big-Headed Majors are so bad, they're going in their own tier, the trash tier. I have so much to say about this, okay? They are not much better than workers. Regular workers, yes, they're a bunch more effective than workers. However, for whatever reason, big-headed workers are a lot more effective than regular workers. They do about as much damage as the majors. The workers and majors are very comparable in stats. They're comparable in food, in attack, in health. Honestly, if the big-headed majors didn't have their piercing, I would say never use them, only use workers. That alone is enough to save them from being completely useless. But my god, they are trash. Just never use them. There's always a better option. And yes, the wood ant melees are still better than them. Up next, we have their better brother, the Super Major, which is going in S tier. My god, these things are amazing. These things are more effective than the Leafcutter Majors and are even cheaper. They have the ability to knock back, to execute, to just insanely melt anything with their high DPS. Yes, they have a chance of stumbling, but honestly, that drawback prevents them from being gods. Like in the big-headed ant colony, these are the all-stars. These are terrible. The super soldier is the Asian kid that's doing calculus at the age of 5. And the major is the guy that's 25, can't do math for shit, and has no job. The major keeps getting asked why they can't be like their brother, the super major. They just need to get good. Up next, we have the fire ants, and both pervasive and vigorous are going in S tier. I literally cannot say anything negative about a fire ant. Both have their purpose and uses. Vigorous are better in the stories, pervasive are better in free play. That being said, they are both amazing. I would never be upset using fire ants. Pervasive and vigorous are in first and second respectively for food efficiency among ants. Most ants have a food efficiency score of around 30 if they're good. Pervasive is in the 40s and vigorous is in 70s. They just blow every ant out of the water. In fact, they might be above S tier, but I'm putting them in S tier right now. All right, we finished tier 4. Now time for tier 5. And we're going to start off with the stink ants. Honestly, I'm thinking either C or D tier, to be honest. I'm going with D tier. Stink ants are one of the most expensive ants in the game, and they are the most expensive if you want them at tier 3. Yes, they have a lot of health and they do a lot of damage, but my god, that 300 food price tag is just very expensive, and I honestly cannot justify it for how good they are. They're good, but they're not that good. I'd rather use Leafcutter Majors rather than stink ants. Up next, we have the Termite Major Soldier. I'm putting them in C tier because they're not meant for combat. They're meant for gathering food, and they do that job exceptionally well. they are great at it. And honestly, they can hold their own pretty decently in combat. I'd say they are honestly around the same level as the big-headed major. And I think they're only, what, 6 food more than the majors? And they actually have a role to perform. Since they aren't really built for combat, I can't justify going any higher than C, but for their task, they are perfect. So I'm putting them in C tier. Next, we have the minor soldiers, and I am putting them in B tier. They're good, they just aren't amazing. I'd personally like to see a bit more damage or some work with the confusion for them to be a bit higher. Actually, you know what? I'm putting them in A tier. I'm also going to put the majors in A tier as well for a different reason. The minor soldier, again, I like their attack and confuse to be a little better, but they are still very effective food-wise and very good in combat. Same thing with the majors. They're really good in combat, they increase the attack speed of your allies, and they hit like a truck and can tank very well. They're very good at their job, and honestly, you could make a case to go in S tier. Honestly, yeah, you could. You know what? I'm going to make that case. They're in S tier. They just have so much health, do a lot of damage, and buff your allies. That's amazing. No matter which way you look at it, it's amazing. Up next, we have the Matabili soldiers. I'm going to put them in A tier. They are very good in combat. They're just very expensive. Like, I really do like using them, and they're really good for fighting a lot of different things. Their price is just the limiting factor. If they were cheaper, they would be S tier. If they weren't as good in combat, they'd be B tier. Simple as that. Next up, we have the medics, and I'm honestly putting them both in S tier. They are both really good quality. The fact that they can revive ants and increase your army size is just brutally OP. I honestly say the medics are on par with the fire ants. You could use either or, and they're amazing. Now, if you're just doing vanilla medics, fast responders is probably better. But once you get field surgeon, either or is great. And honestly, anesthetist probably takes the lead. They're pretty decent in combat. They're only 75 food, so they're not that bad food-wise. And again, they can increase your army size, meaning you can gather food faster and fight more, and also reduce the cost on your food stores. Because these revived ants are already dead, they're not putting an extra toll on your food. So if something kills them, you didn't lose anything. Cannot sing their praises anymore. Up next, we have the driver ant minor. I'm honestly going to put them in C tier. I do not think they're that good. The lower the health is, the faster they move and the faster they attack. And that's okay. They're pretty cheap, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think they're as combat effective as the army ants or the fire ants. Actually, I'm going to put them in B tier because they're good. They're good for their price, but the army ants and the fire ants are just better in every way, I feel. And that's kind of how I feel about the major too. They are really good, but I prefer the army ant major and just, well, the big-headed major and the termite major over all of them. I prefer all 3 of these ants over the driver ant. Really good in combat, and yes, they're pretty expensive at 140, but like I said, I just don't think they're as effective as the other options in that food/combat range. Up next, we have the bullet ants. Oh, I cannot figure out where to put you. I'm going to put you in C tier because you are God. You are God tier if you can get them. The fact that they need to be level 3 to hatch 1 is ridiculous. That's 450 food to get them into a place where they can be hatched, which makes them the most expensive ant to get out. However, they are very effective in combat. They can instantly execute any ant, which is broken against ants like the army ant majors or the super soldiers. Like in the ant battle royale, bullet ants were undefeated. Most ants didn't even kill one of the bullet ants. Only the really top tier ants were able to kill one, and that was just barely. Very effective in combat, but the fact that they need 50 food to hatch or 150 if you don't have the modification or the adaptation, that means bullet ants are really hard to justify for their costs. Again, if you can get them, they're amazing. They're S+ tier. It's just getting them there. That's going to be tough, especially if you have to focus on surviving. You're probably going to be using other ants before them. But yeah, this is my ant tier list. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Do I have it right? Do I have it wrong? Let me know. And I'll catch all you later. Peace.